Joining us now, Ned Ryun. He's the president, CEO, and actually the founder, too, all three in one, of American Majority. This is an organization that's designed to get out the vote, get voters registered, knock on doors, move the needle, real action. They actually pay people to work for them, make calls, and they are following the Democrat model, which is hire a bunch of people to go out and get it done for elections. And their founder and president with us now, Ned Ryun. Hey, Ned, saw you Tuesday at the Liberty Summit.
That's right.
Great to have you on, sir.
Yeah, no, good to be with you, John, and you're correct. I mean, there are so many things to talk about, but you're right. I mean, a lot of what I've done with American Majority over the last 12 years is I look at what the left has done, and I steal a page from their playbook. And with the C3 side of it, American Majority, we're training state and local candidates how to run for office. Again, big believer politics is policy. And training activists how to be better at get out the vote, social media, all of these things. And then with our C4 arm, American Majority Action, we're doing exactly what you were describing. We are literally, we hire people. We send them out to targeted doors, phones. We do peer-to-peer texting. And I know you and I were talking Tuesday, John, about the situation. A lot of what we do, bread and butter, has been live door knocks. I'm a believer that that's the gold standard in politics. You have to knock on somebody's door. You have to have that face-to-face conversation. Of course, we're living in very strange times. So a lot of our work so far, and we're focusing on Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Virginia, great state of Virginia, has been live phone calls and peer-to-peer texting. But the encouraging part, John, is we've been getting about a 20 to 25% live connect. So when we call and have a conversation, about 1 out of every 4 calls. Same thing with peer-to-peer. So good ratio in the conversations, but I got to tell you, I am trying to get us onto the doors because that literally is the gold standard. 1 out of 14 people that you have a conversation with on the doorstep will actually vote for your candidate simply because you showed up and had a conversation with them. So we're starting to roll some of that in Wisconsin, trying to do some in Minnesota, and we're hopefully rolling out some doors here, primarily in Virginia 7, in the state of Virginia.
Well, we can win Virginia 7, we can win Virginia 2, but I love that you're focusing your resources. The thing is, obviously with COVID-19, Ned, things have to change. So you're changing now to you can't knock on doors.
That's right.
People don't want that. So
Adapt.
So how are you adapting?
Well, I mean, the peer-to-peer texting is actually something the left has used very successfully, but for that to happen, to be able to be legal according to FEC rules, you have to have an individual on our side texting an individual on that side. So it's literally, I think the way for people to think about it, instead of phone banking, and I would hope that a lot of your listeners have done that. Obviously, you're all in a room, you're dialing and calling targeted voters, having those conversations. Think of a peer-to-peer text program the same way. People are sitting there in a room, they have phone numbers, and they're texting, peer-to-peer texting. So somebody is actually texting and encouraging them. Are you getting out to vote? And I will say this, John, there are a couple points to make here. Absentee ballots are going to be massive in this election, and I'll tell you that because we've been active in the field in Wisconsin most of this year so far in the spring elections up there, the special congressional Wisconsin 7. In Wisconsin 7, it was 47.5% of all the votes cast in that special election were absentee ballots. And so this is something I've been talking with the Trump campaign about, especially in Florida. This is going to be a massive, and again, I want people to be clear, to understand, absentee ballot requests versus universal mail-in ballots, completely different animals. Absentee ballot, perfectly legal. There's a process. There's a system.
They're legit, right? Absentee ballots are legit because they get you either go in and you either go in and get one, or or you request one and it's mailed to you personally. You have to sign it, fill it out, and you have to mail it back. You can't hand it to somebody. And
universal mail-in is ripe for fraud. We know up in New Jersey recently in spring elections, 1 out of every 5 was fraudulent. We know that a lot of these things, when you have universal mail-in, there's a lot of fraud that takes place. And I tell people this, there are so many things at stake, John, this fall. I mean, so many things it's hard to probably discuss even in a 2-hour conversation with you. But I tell people free and fair elections are absolutely at stake this fall because if Democrats win the White House, Senate, and House, you know what they're going to do. They're going to give universal amnesty for literally tens of millions of illegal immigrants, and they are going to pass universal mail-in ballots. You don't even need 20% fraud to win national. You probably need 5-10%, if that. And so I tell people free and fair elections are absolutely at stake this November.
So they'll just have a mail-in ballot where if you're registered, they just mail a ballot to your address, regardless if you're there or not.
Well, you might not even be a legal citizen. I mean, think about the motor voter rules,
matter.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. They're going to mail a ballot, and that person might or might not vote. I mean, there are very screwy things that happen. I'm actually working with some people across about 10 different states where they are trying to identify even absentee ballot requests if they're fraudulent, but obviously the universal mail-in. Are they going to real addresses? Is it an empty lot? Why are there 20 people living in a one-room, bedroom apartment according to this request? And seeing if we can't develop and show that there is actually a real pattern of fraud and abuse already. And I tell people this, John, national elections are really about 7 to 10 states, and the victory is in the margins. If you think again about Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan in 2016, Trump won those three combined by 77,000 votes. Those were the electoral votes that put him in the White House. Victory is in the margins, and I tell people, if you are on the left and trying to figure out how you can sneak a dozen votes out of that precinct and a dozen votes out of that one, it all adds up, and all of a sudden you realize we've got real issues in the 7 to 10 states that truly matter.
Now, let's go to voter registration. Where are you guys on that? And the Trump campaign keeps telling me about this massive vote registration effort they have. True or false?
You know what, John? This is what always gets me in trouble. I'm going to be brutally honest, okay? This is the one thing where I'm just like, okay, let us be brutally honest.
That's why we get along. Right.
I had a brother and a brother-in-law and a really good friend that used to be deputy director of the RNC about 17 years ago. And this is just to show you a little bit of a story of how it really works. RNC goes out. This is in the 2004 cycle. We're going to register 1 million new voters, right? Yeah, they actually registered 100,000 but claimed 1 million. So that was one. I mean, they knew that too, and they spent a lot of time, a lot of money, months and months, and they only registered a tenth of what they said, and then they claimed 1 million. I will say this for those listening. It takes a lot of time and money. If you're getting a legitimate voter registration, somebody new that's never been registered, getting them actually registered to vote, that dollar cost average, let's call it $20 to $25 per registration, and a really, really, really good program, John, will get you about 10,000 new registered voters a month. If anyone is telling you otherwise, they are lying.
So we're getting the proverbial smoke blown up our butt.
I would say, and I've actually told the campaign, listen, you don't need to waste time and money on voter registration. You need to go pursue these people, and specifically in Florida, the 300 and some thousand people that have not gotten an absentee ballot request that actually voted for Trump in 2016. You don't need to register new voters.
Right.
You have to go give these people get them to get an absentee ballot because they are going to probably vote for Trump. Stop it with this voter registration stuff. The thing I will say on this, though, John, because I don't want people to go, oh, Ned Ryan hates voter registration efforts. No, the time to do it was probably 6 to 9 months ago, because I do know this, John, to be fair, that newly registered voters, about 80% of them will actually vote in the very next election once they've been registered. But the time to do it is not 100 days out from an election. It was January, February. It was beginning of this year to really emphasize that. Not now.
It was
now it's absentee
2019.
ballot. Now it's get out the vote. Exactly.
Right. Now it's get out the vote. I mean, it's too
We're
much
40
money,
some
too
days
much
away
time.
from people. John, we are literally, 6 weeks away from people starting to cast ballots in some of these states, being able to vote absentee ballot. We're literally 6 weeks away. Like, focus on the fundamentals. And I'm truly convinced, I mean, you were talking about some of the poll numbers. You look at the voter expectation polls, you look at some of these likely voter polls like Trafalgar in Wisconsin, Florida show Trump within a point or two. The voter expectation polls, which are showing virtually a dead heat. And by that I mean, John, people are asked, well, who are you going to vote for today? If the elections were today, in July, who would you vote for? Well, I'd vote for Biden, by 10 points. Well, then they're asked, who do you think is going to actually win in November? Trump by 2. So I even told Trump this on Friday when I was in there for my dad's ceremony. I'm like, sir, you're actually doing pretty well in the voter expectation polls. There are still things that need to change, but there's reason for optimism.
And that's when people have an expectation that somebody's going to win, it's like, well, they think that things are going to change between now and November.
They do.
Basically.
I mean, John, the real campaign doesn't traditionally start until after the conventions. all of this
Right.
has kind of been a lot of storm and fury, really signifying nothing. When it's all said and done, June, July polls, I mean, Dukakis was up by 17 points on George H.W. Bush in the summer of 1988, right?
Yep.
You know, he did.
Yep.
Guess
was
who didn't win?
50. He came out of the Democratic convention in Atlanta. I believe it was in Atlanta. He came up 55-38 over Bush. And
right.
I remember Dukakis people were
Crowing,
looking for real
measuring
estate.
the drapes.
Well, they were. Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I tell people,
Done deal.
midsummer polls, literally, that and $1 buy you a Coke. I mean, they're worthless. It's after the conventions that things start to heat up. And the other crazy part is statistics also show, John, fully 20% of likely voters, and this has been more traditional. I mean, I think we're in a different dynamic where a lot of people are starting to firm up their opinions before this, but typically 30 days out, fully 20% of those that are actually going to vote in an election are still undecided. So please, these polls, whatever, I don't really buy them. You get through the conventions, you get to September, October, then we can have a serious conversation about likely voters, weighted properly in the states that really matter. Then we can have a conversation.
John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Ned Ryun. Ned is the author of a best-selling book. He's also the president, founder, and CEO of American Majority, where he actually goes out, copy the book from the liberals and the Democrats, goes out and make things happen. Ned, tell us, what are your plans in Virginia between now and November 3rd?
So actually it's across all the 3 states we're targeting, John. I mean, the focus is we're literally going after white males, working class, because that's a demographic that Trump won by 37 points in 2016, and I think it's one that needs to be emphasized. But, we looked at some of these things as we were starting to roll out the plan. There were over 400,000 that fit that demographic in Wisconsin alone that didn't even vote in 2016. So you think there are hundreds of thousands of them, and we know that's also true in Virginia and Minnesota as well, hundreds of thousands of this demographic that Trump won by, again, almost 40 points. So that's our target. That's what we're really focusing on with our calls and our peer-to-peer and hopefully soon doors. And then we're focusing a message, again, as you were talking about law and order, how you really want to see this come to your neighborhood, of course not, but also economic self-sufficiency. And I think it resonates. I work with American Greatness. That's where I write my pieces. And we've been doing a series of state-level polls around the country, Florida, Arizona, all these different states. And the thing that resonates, John, with about 3/4 of all the voters, regardless of party affiliation, is economic self-sufficiency. And what do I mean by that? It means bringing manufacturing home. It means actually bringing that manufacturing home so you can have more jobs for American workers. It means being smart about the fact, and I talked about this early on in the whole coronavirus situation, where we have offshored the manufacturing of antibiotics, of drugs, all of these things. China has virtually a monopoly on it. It's a national security issue. And so economic self-sufficiency is one of those things that really actually does very well with Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. And so that's one of our messages as well. So we're trying to get that out, trying to see where that is. And then obviously it comes down to, are you voting? Do you have an absentee ballot? And then, obviously down the stretch on Election Day, as it comes into early in-person voting, and then on Election Day, get to the polls and vote. I tell people this all the time, John. I think that the November 2020 elections are probably the most momentous elections we've had since 1860. I mean, literally, you have to go all that way back 160 years to truly understand this is the impact that these elections will have on which direction we will go as a country. You have to go back 160 years to truly understand how momentous they are.
1860, that was Lincoln Stephen Douglas, right?
Lincoln Civil War. I mean, Lincoln gets elected, Republican. 1856, they had said we are against two evils, barbarism, relics of barbarism, slavery and polygamy. And Lincoln gets elected. The southern states know exactly what the Republican Party is about. And I tell people this all the time, John. Republican president gets elected, and the Southern Democrats, because the overwhelming majority of those in the South were Democrats, the Southern Democrats said, we don't think so. You're not going to compel us to free our slaves. And the Republican president said, yes, I am. And that's what the Civil War was about, when a Republican president told the Southern Democrats you don't get to have slaves anymore. And even worse, John, they decided after they had lost the war, well, we're going to start a domestic terrorism organization called the KKK to make your lives miserable. But, yeah, I mean, this is that is where I think we're at. I mean, we're at, if Donald Trump can get reelected, I think it's going to be amazing, and they are doing everything. If you think it's rough right now, John, wait till we come down the home stretch in the last 30 days, and they think and start to realize, oh my gosh, Donald Trump could actually get reelected. I think it might be like nothing we've ever seen before. Those last 30 days coming into the November election.
Like what could happen?
I'm just thinking about all these riots that are going on right now. The riots, the looting, the protesting, the censoring. I mean, you saw Don Jr. got censored. It basically blocked off Twitter. They dropped Breitbart. I mean, Breitbart has dropped 99.7% on its search traffic in regards to politics, and I think Biden, whatever it was, since 2016. Google is throttling them. Their Twitter is shutting down conservative handles. The more rioting and the looting. The insanity of the Democrats in the House. If you guys were watching the Barr hearings yesterday, how appalling was that? And then the mainstream media, they've already kind of dropped the pretense of having any objectivity. I think they are going to double, triple, quadruple down on going after President Trump to try and bring him down. So if you think it's at 9.5 right now or a 10, let's try about a 13, 14, 15 coming down the home stretch. I think it's going to be incredible.
Especially if Trump starts moving up in the polls.
If
they get up, he is now. And if they get up on October 15th and say, oh, my God, this thing is slipping away, if the election were held today, we lose, then all hell breaks loose.
Oh, I absolutely. And I think, again, this is going to be a key part of this campaign, John. They have to get Biden out of his basement, and he has to be debating Trump at least 3 times. People have to see Joe Biden for what he is. He is an empty vessel, as Trump says, a Trojan horse for the far left's agenda. That's all he is. But they're hiding. They're protecting him. They need to get him out for 3 2-hour debates so people can understand there's not much left there. There's not much left. He is an empty vessel. But if he gets elected, the far left will literally get every last item on its wish list.
Okay, I just got a text here. I want to say this, and then I got to go. A lot of people telling me, we were telling the Breitbart story earlier. They were telling me get rid of Google and go to DuckDuckGo.
Yes, I did that a year ago.
DuckDuckGo. I'm going to get rid of Google now and do DuckDuckGo.
Yep, I would encourage people to do the same. I've done it a year ago.
How's that worked out for you, Ned?
Oh, phenomenal. No, it's great. I mean, and they have real strict policies on data and privacy and all that. Great search engine results. No, I've been very happy. I mean, this is what I do for a living. I've got to research. I've got to do TV. I've got to do op-eds. I've got to do commentary, all this stuff.
So you go to DuckDuckGo.
I go to DuckDuckGo.
All right. Ned, thank you. Thank you for being with us. Ned Ryun,
Thanks,
American
John.
Majority. All right, thank you. John Fredericks Radio Network.